Chapter 36. The hum of another poorly tuned engine. A small red plane wobbled and shook in the sky, getting bigger and bigger. It wasn't going to crash, was it? It dropped its undercarriage and landed with a giant thump on Hamwell Airfield's runway. Sergeant Jackson heaved himself back into the van and nudged Constable Spencer, snoozing in the driver's seat. Spencer started the van and, before Sergeant Jackson had pulled the door shut, sped towards the plane. The plane taxied and stopped in front of Ida, almost nose to nose at the end of the runway. The police van overshot, screeched in a U-turn, finally stopping barely yards from its parking spot. Sergeant Jackson and Constable Spencer bundled out with their truncheons raised. They stood nervously round the plane, whose propellers were still spinning. "The steps! The steps!" Sergeant Jackson pointed his truncheon at the aircraft steps, half buried in the little snowdrift at the edge of the field where Harry had pushed them. Constable Spencer pushed them across the tarmac into place and resumed his position nervously. Harry gave Ida the thumbs up from the cockpit. She had springs for boots. She was so happy her whole body smiled, and she couldn't stop herself. Ida wrapped her arms round Baby. "You see? You see?" "I see," said Baby. "You best go and get her." The plane door opened with a big clunk. Harry stood on the top step with Bonnie, but his fist was bloody, and he was cradling his arm against his chest. Ida opened her arms and ran to her sister. Bonnie held the rail and almost danced down the steps to meet Ida. They clung to each other, together again at last. "He's in there," Harry directed Constable Spencer and Sergeant Jackson inside the plane. "Sorry it took a while." Harry indicated his bloody fist and hurt arm and flicked back his long black fringe. "It took a little more persuasion than just the Ovaltine. I bet you didn't think I was coming back." Ida had no words at all. Over Bonnie's shoulder, she could only smile at Harry and hope that told him how grateful she was. Constable Spencer nervously marched up the steps, dangling handcuffs, Sergeant Jackson giving him encouraging little pushes from behind. "I didn't want to go, not really." Bonnie sniffed into Ida's shoulder. "But Uncle Arthur kept telling me you were coming too. He kept telling me. I'm sorry, Dar. I'm sorry. Ida buried her wet face in Bonnie's hair and whispered, I know. Ida was still clinging to Bonnie when the others came and joined them. Brian stroked Bonnie's hair and Robert asked her if she wanted to help with the snowman, a snowy likeness of Sergeant Jackson, complete with helmet. Frank licked snow as his tail wagged 19 to the dozen. But something wasn't right. Ida couldn't quite put her finger on it. Bonnie was back playing in the snow like any 8-year-old would be doing, so she wasn't going to worry. A groaning and a shuffling came from just inside the door of the plane. Constable Spencer and Sergeant Jackson appeared, carrying Uncle Arthur like one of his own dead bodies. Sergeant Jackson huffed and puffed backwards down the steps with Uncle Arthur's feet, while Constable Spencer carried the head end. Uncle Arthur's nose was bloody and his head lolled. "His own sleeping preparation, in the Ovaltine, of course," explained Harry, following them down the steps, cradling his injured arm. "Didn't have quite enough. He took a while to go off and then started coming round on landing, so desperate measures." Ida was trying to imagine Harry dealing with a groggy Uncle Arthur when she heard the cough and splutter of another very poorly tuned engine. There was a little squeal of brakes, and Underwood's van, the one that could easily be mistaken for a laundry van if you were Robert, stopped on the tarmac. Leaning over the steering wheel, her eyes narrow, and with a grin as broad as a Cheshire cat's, was Mrs. Buller. What is she doing here? Mrs. Buller unwedged herself from the driver's seat, slammed the driver's door behind her, straightened her jacket, and marched across the muddle of snowy footprints to Sergeant Jackson. Bill lurched along behind her. William made a run for it, but nobody was bothering about him. Mrs. Buller pointed a commanding finger at the girls. "I believe you have abducted Bonnie Barnes, and it appears some more children in need of Nettlefield Granger's care, Sergeant." Before Ida realised what was happening, Bill had his beefy arms round Bonnie and was dragging her into Underwood's van. No! 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 Bonnie screamed, what's happening? I want to stay with you! Ida ran, slipping on the icy patches, but picking herself up again and scrambling, arms and legs akimbo, for the door before it shut. But Bill, bad Bill Teasdale, had already bundled her away and locked her in